Well, update. So I don't know. Did you guys notice I wasn't here the last couple weeks? Anybody notice? You're like, I've never been here, so I didn't notice. I don't even know who you are. Like, that's fine. My name's Bryan. My wife and I just got back from Hawaii. And, I'm not bragging. I just say that because it's good. It's great. It's great to work at a church that you'd go to. Does that make sense? You ever go on a trip and it's just like you're ready to come home because you love your people? That's a good place to be in life. And if one of the core values I have for our gatherings, why does this exist? Why do we gather? Is that we would find our people, and we would grow spiritually, and we would make a difference. And so that's the purpose of this, is that we would find our people together, and we'd look around and we go, I think I found my people. Like, I think I have. So part of it for Thursdays is this is why the lights are up, and you're like, why the food? Why this? Because we want to be able to look around and say, I think these are my people. So that's just and you're like, well, you're like glowing. I don't know. That's just Hawaii, and now I'm back, and it'll leave here in a couple weeks. So we're going to dive into the message. Is that okay? I got to tell you, this is one that I just feel like is in my gut. And part of it was this weekend, I was back to church. Like, I wasn't speaking. I was here on Sunday. I felt like I was just coming to New Life, like I was just here. And I sat there, and I just really felt like the message was speaking to me. And I started writing down notes. And when I started taking notes, there was some things I was just like, man, this is so good. And then I flipped the page to what we were going to be talking about this week. And the problem, anybody here last Thursday? You're here, a couple of you, okay. The problem we looked at last Thursday is division amongst Christians. And pretty powerful stuff, and that the solution is harmony. And Paul does this in the next chapter, is he circles back again with a new perspective. And so I just really, I was reading through what Paul said, and I was like, I really feel passionate about this because God's doing a work in me. Does that make sense? And so I want to do this first. Do you have a way of taking notes? Maybe physically, maybe you have a phone. Do you have a way of taking notes? Pull out something that you can take notes with. And I want you to write this down. Some of you're like maybe an internal processor. You'll come up with like a word or two. Others of you may be like, you could write a whole novel. Maybe just keep it to like a paragraph. Think of a time in your life when you felt like you belonged. You felt invited in. You felt like welcome, a sense of hospitality, but you really felt like you belonged. Could be it was like you started a new job and the team you were on. Could be a sense of family or community, but just think of a specific time in your life where you felt like you belonged. And then when you jot it down, maybe you're like, I can't think of one. Think of a movie where you saw somebody and they look like they belong. All right. Romans chapter 15, verse 7 says this. Therefore, accept each other just as Christ has accepted you, so that God will be given glory. And, the epistle that Paul is writing is written to the church in Rome. The church is divided over issues because of different cultural backgrounds, different diversity of story, and two groups of Christians there's a lot of tension. You have the Jewish Christians that in some way feel like they have a heritage to Christianity. There's a lot of tradition. And then you also have the Gentiles, or those who are new to faith. And these two groups are coming together, and there's tension. And have you noticed that there's any division among Christians over the last couple of years? Not at all. It's like you've never been on Facebook. Okay, so there's division, isn't there? And the enemy wants to use division to just keep kind of picking us apart. And Jesus is looking to build his church in unity. And last week, we just looked at how harmony brings us together. And I wrote this, so this is what I wrote down. I was sitting right in there, and we said these 4 things: accept differences, don't criticize or condemn, be willing to give something up, and follow your convictions. So that last one, I circled that, and I started to think, is this true? I think this is true. The older I get, the stronger my convictions get. Is it true? I don't know. Is that true? I get older, and I find myself sounding like my grandpa. I have these things that I just am convicted about, and my wife is like, oh, just leave it alone. Is anybody married to that person? Okay, don't raise your hand. No, so I did this. I sat there and I wrote down my convictions. Have you ever done this? I don't even know what made me think of it. I just never done it. I was like, I'm gonna start writing down things that I feel are convictions. And then I wrote down this question. I don't know if it's a good question, but I think it might be. Can you have strong convictions and strong relationships? So I think so. I said, I was trying notes. I was like, yeah, I think I can do that. Can you have strong convictions and strong relationships with people who don't share your convictions or have different convictions? There's a little bit there, isn't there? So I made a list of my convictions. And I was writing this message looking at what Paul says, doubling back on accepting each other, which, by the way, words matter. And Paul says to accept each other. And I wonder sometimes in the church if we spell it wrong, and instead of accept with an A, we spell it with an E, and we say accept. Is that true? Do we do that with our convictions? Do our convictions sometimes start to push people away, not pull them in? I called some mentors, and I just started talking through this, because I was like, you know where you're wrestling through it. And I'm not saying my convictions, like, you're, like, scandalized. I'm just saying, like, these are things I think that we all feel. I called Wes, great mentor in my life. I mean, just like, we have that relationship. And he said, are you planning to read your convictions? And I said, I hadn't. And he said, you better be. And he said, it's going to make it safe for everybody when you read yours. Is it safe in here to read my convictions? Okay, so first of all, a conviction's not opinion, right? So an opinion is different than a conviction. An opinion is something that opinions change, right? I mean, actually, I would say it's healthy if our opinions change. I mean, it's unhealthy if we keep the same opinions, but our opinions, they change. I actually think it's healthy for young people to feel like they have the permission to change their mind on some things. Now, our world probably has enough opinions. Do you agree? I think our world needs more convictions and less opinions. And, I have opinions. I wrote those down too. I don't think you're going to like those. I mean, I have my opinions. I think In-N-Out is overrated. I'm sorry. I don't know. I just think it is. I think Kobe Bryant's the best basketball player of all time. I don't know. It's not a conviction. It's just I think, yeah, okay. Do you agree with me? Opinions. But convictions are different. I wrote down 5. I actually wrote down 10, and the other 5 were just opinions, and I took them out. I'm going to do this. I'm going to read them, and I'm going to try not to explain them just so we can, and then I'm going to, okay. You guys are going to end this, and you're like, your sweet wife. Putting up with you. Okay, my first conviction. I read the label on all the food I buy. You're like, that sounds like it's a conviction. I can't not do it. Okay. 2, I know where all of my clothes were made and by who. Not like personally, but like where. 3, my kids hear me say sorry. 4, I don't entertain open-ended text threads with women who aren't my wife. That was a good one, wasn't it? Yeah. You guys are like, I don't know about the food thing, but that one feels solid. It's like, okay, Bryan, you got 1 out of 5 sounds like you probably are a Christian. 5, wherever we've lived, my wife and I walk our streets. I don't know, they're not that deep. But they're real to me. Do you have a list of convictions? I mean, I bet if you were sitting here, you could write something out. I mean, it'd be interesting to, by the way, it'd be interesting too with your spouse. I mean, I also think convictions, they adapt and form, and you say them different ways in different seasons, but convictions are important, aren't they? Do we need to raise young people with convictions? Absolutely. Absolutely. But can convictions push people away? So there's a story behind all of our convictions, isn't there? There's something. I mean, it just doesn't like, you don't one day wake up and you're like, hey, let's look at the label on these box of food. Okay, there's a story behind all of our convictions. My grandpa, I think some of you, I've shared the story. My grandpa was diagnosed with early Alzheimer's when he was really young. And my dad had always struggled with his weight. And my dad just said, I don't know, he's probably in his 40s. And he just said, I'm not going to live like this, and I'm going to eat different. And food has a massive impact on your brain and how your brain functions and dementia. And so I really took that to heart. And my wife is celiac, so she can't eat gluten. And in our vows, I wrote that I was going to check to make sure there was gluten in all of our food so that she would know she could eat in my home. It's a conviction. I believe that our bodies are temples, that I want to honor God and the things we grow and eat. It matters to me. And you can sit here and you're like, I don't know, it doesn't matter to me. I think that's okay. I walked the streets of India with my wife, and we saw the brothels and the slaves that worked those brothels. And I looked in the eyes of young girls who are far too young. And I want to know that the clothes I wear are made by people who have an equitable job. And I get emotional just thinking about it, and it's my conviction. It's a conviction. It's mine. I don't know. Like, I just feel that. Too many people grow up in homes without dads who have the ability to apologize. And my mom grew up in a home with an alcoholic father, and her story growing up was she never heard her dad say he was sorry. That wasn't my story. I have a great dad. And I want to pass on that legacy, and I want my kids to hear me say I'm sorry. Too many pastors' marriages fall apart in our day and age. It's just, it's statistics. I don't need to entertain text messages with women who aren't my wife. You get like, I'm not, but it's like, that's the reality. I want to incarnate where I live, and I want my kids to be able to go. I want people to see my fame. I want to be out on walks. We live in the streets of Tacoma, and I want to be out, and I want to live there, and I want to see my neighbors, and I want to experience those places. Those are my convictions. There's a story behind all of them. Is there a story behind your convictions? Paul is going to show us in chapter 15 what it looks like to be united, not despite our convictions, but because of our convictions. I had a basketball coach when I was young who instilled in me, I'm left-handed, and he said one of the gifts left-handed players have is they easily can be ambidextrous. And so he said you're going to dribble with your right hand so your left hand shoots better. We have a sense of followers of Jesus, not that we give up our convictions, but we have enough grace to widen our arms and see people. Does our world need it? So I didn't know this. I learned this week. Learned it this week, didn't know it. Convictions are guardrails, aren't they? Isn't that a good, I've heard that metaphor, maybe you have. I've heard messages preached on that metaphor, like there's guardrails, and I don't know, like I drive a car and I know there's rails on the side, and I thought those were guardrails. So those are called guardrails, but there's actually the historical word of guardrails are on train tracks. Did you know this? So I was talking about guardrails, and somebody's like, hold on. I work with somebody I know somebody who works with trains. And they corrected me on this image of guardrails. So guardrails aren't the rails on the outside. Okay, guardrails are the rails that are on the inside. And guardrails aren't that, it's not like there's the train tracks and there's always guardrails. Guardrails are only there on tight turns, dangerous bridges, places with high wind, or any place where the train could be at risk. Listen, our convictions matter. They're a gift from God, but I believe that he puts them on the inside of us, not to be thrown on the outside. We can share, right? Like we can have a conversation. I think we can even disagree. But listen, if my daughter Kennedy and my son Rocky, if I put my convictions on them, would that be too heavy of a weight? I don't know. A lot of you have raised kids longer than I have. I think I can instill and train up, but I think at some point, I don't know if Rocky's going to want to check the label on all his food. And I don't know if he should have to. I was talking to another mentor this week, and he said this. He said, if you push your convictions too hard on your kids when they're young, they'll either do this. They might adopt them, but they're never truly theirs, and they're just doing it to please you, and it's not alive inside of them. The other is they don't adopt it, and they revolt, and there's always this sense that maybe your love is only dependent on that relationship. I thought that was interesting. You know, for many of us, we can't go back and parent again, but I think there is a sense that we can have a relationship with our kids where our convictions, that doesn't have to be the backpack they wear. So I'd be curious. I mean, I don't know. Like, for you to write down your convictions. I was sitting there this weekend, and I started to realize some of my convictions are pretty close to the stuff we're looking at. I mean, food was number one on my list. Do our convictions get in the way? I want to look at what Paul says here. If you have a Bible, open it up to Romans 15. It says this, Romans 15, verse 5. May God, who gives this patience and encouragement, help you live in complete harmony with each other, as is fitting for the followers of Christ Jesus. Then all of you can join together with one voice, giving praise and glory to God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. I just wrote this down. I think it's true. I think our convictions come from a place of our values. If you imagine maybe like an iceberg, our convictions are at the top, and then our values are underneath that. Below that is our relationship with Jesus. Everything comes out of our relationship with Jesus. We see this, Paul starts with Jesus. Beware of theology that doesn't start with Jesus. I mean, that's the first place at New Life. If you're new to New Life, everything we do starts with the lens of Jesus. Jesus, that's where we start. We read everything through Jesus. And that's what Paul does here. His convictions start with Jesus. And by the way, here's what the world will do. Basically, the world will start with convictions that sit on top of opinions, that sit on top of feelings. Does that make sense? Like, it's just a feeling I have. And so we start with Jesus. That's what Paul does. And as I was reading this, I noticed, verse 7, therefore accept each other just as Christ has accepted you, so that God will be given the glory. I mean, I think make this your lock screen. Write this on a sticky note, put it at your desk, whatever you need to get this into our heart. Accept each other. I wrote down a couple things. You can write these down. I want to come back, though. I want to think with the end in mind. I want to come back to that sense of belonging. Somewhere you felt a strong sense of belonging. I'm guessing because people or a group of people or a team was willing to put aside maybe some of their convictions, or maybe just make room for you at the table. And you felt that. Would the church in Kitsap be a place where people walk in and feel that? Would your home be that kind of place? I mean, honestly, an update on where we're at. We are active. I mean, we're going to have an Easter gathering in Tacoma. It's happening. It's like which, by the way, thank you for allowing me a vacation. It's like we're launching this and we're also launching Tacoma. But that's going to happen. People are emerging. Leaders are emerging. It's beautiful. But when I pray over our neighborhood, my prayer is that the hospitality is that people would walk the streets and just know that there is a place for them at the table. And there's this story that Jesus tells in Luke chapter 7. And I've been rereading this story all week. And Jesus gets invited by one of the Pharisees, teachers of the religious law, to a dinner party. And houses then were a little bit different than they are now. You'd really have like an outdoor courtyard that would kind of match up, like be a part of the marketplace. So almost like, think about like maybe like a hotel, or where you can kind of see everybody's courtyards. That's the picture. So they're probably eating outside. Jesus would be sitting there. You'd typically be sitting on the ground. Jesus is dining with the Pharisee. And this woman emerges. If you know this story, it says that basically it doesn't say specifics, but she's got a messy past. You can probably assume she was a prostitute. And she kneels at Jesus' feet, and she begins to weep. And with her tears and her hair, she washes Jesus' feet. I mean, if it sounds awkward now, it was for sure awkward then. It's not like it was then and like that wasn't, I mean, it's like that probably would be awkward. I mean, can you imagine, just picture it. If I'm here right now, and this is like, so then you got to think about this Pharisee, like, you know, he's like, sitting there. This would have probably painted a picture of how the world worships because, you know, at a temple to a foreign god, you would have a foreign prostitute. There'd be a woman there. I mean, this is all weird. The Pharisees like, I don't know what is going on. And this woman is there at Jesus' feet. And Jesus tells a story, doesn't he? And he says, you know, somebody gives out a loan for 50 pieces of silver. And somebody else gets a loan for 500 pieces of silver. And neither of them can pay this loan back. Which person felt a deeper sense of forgiveness, felt a deeper sense of freedom? Which one of them felt the most free? And you can almost picture the Pharisee nodding and recording the answer of the one who was given the most, was forgiven the most. And Jesus says, you didn't greet me with a kiss when all the tradition, all these convictions that you have, all the tradition of who you are, you did none of that. And here is this woman who breaks all the social norms at my feet. In our community, I'm just wondering, are there people that, if they came into the gathering, you'd be like, should they be here? They were sitting at your table at home. Do our convictions push people away? I wrote down just a couple things you can write down tonight before we worship together. Can we have strong relationships and strong and strong convictions? I just said this: accept as Jesus accepts you. First thing I wrote down is Jesus didn't leave to please himself. I mean, we see that right from the text that Jesus came to show the Jewish people so that God's promises to their ancestors, and he came as a servant. Second thing I wrote down is Jesus is patient and encouraging. Paul writes, may God who gives this patience and encouragement. I wonder in some of our relationships if there's a level of patience or encouragement that you need to get back into your system. And the third thing I wrote down is Jesus makes room for outsiders. And I sent these notes out to a mentor of mine, a different mentor. And some of you know him, Dan Sertall. Some of the faces in this room know this great mentor in my life and long time pastor at our church. he emailed me back and he said, Jesus making room for outsiders doesn't go far enough. Jesus clears the table. Jesus calls you by name. He said, Jesus opens the door to the house and starts shouting your name. I was like, well, Dan, that's a pretty long point. I don't know. Would you get that sense tonight? If you have been in a place where somebody else's convictions have hurt you at a level that maybe you still carry some bitterness, tonight, would you have a moment to lay those at the feet of Jesus? If you're here and maybe your own conviction, maybe you have strong convictions and you're like, I feel like they have pushed people away. But maybe you're just like me where you're like, I don't know if I've had a sense of what they are, and I think, Jesus, I need to make sure that they point to you. May you have a moment to identify. And then I wrote this down for our action is that would we welcome in outsiders? Would we be a group of people, a church that welcomes in outsiders? Would we see division as an opportunity? Would we see different people groups and people with different convictions as an opportunity to stretch our arms out as wide as possible and invite in those who don't think like us? We're going to have a moment of worship here in just a second. I'm going to have you stand and we're going to have a moment of prayer. And I don't know how real this message is for your family. I don't know. Have you felt, I explained it this way this week. Have you felt some division in your family, but it's almost like lingering from COVID? Maybe it's just me. You can stand. We're going to worship together. Well, it's one of the, sometimes you're like, I don't know. I'm going to share a story, but this might just be a Thursday story. Does that make sense? I'm speaking Sunday, and always on Thursday, you're like testing stuff out. There's been a little bit of division in my family. And I come from, I love my family. But I just tell you, COVID messed us up a little bit. Did that happen to us? It's like, and you're like, how deep? Well, not deep, like just enough. And I have one sibling, my sister, younger sister. I'm older brother. And my sister and her husband gave birth to their daughter basically the day we went into lockdown. Yeah, do you remember this? We were flattening the curve. I was like, I'll see you in 2 weeks. I'll meet my niece in a month. I'll meet my niece in 2 months. It's been 2.5 years. And they're still in the bubble. And it's been, you guys, we all did it. Like, we know it's been hard. It's happening in your family. There's division somewhere. And to know that my convictions are different, to know my conviction for getting my child out with people is different than their conviction has been a wrestling match. Not verbally, but in here. But my wife and I, Kayla, we've just been praying. We're like, God, I don't know what to do. And a month ago, my sister called me and just said, we're coming home. I said, you're going to come visit? She said, we're going to move there. And next week, my sister is moving here. And yeah, this is why I'm wrestling. It's just a wrestle, right? And the reason I share that story is if you're in the middle of a miracle and there's some division, keep praying. Keep praying. Keep praying. There's times that I needed to budget in enough grace for my family to be able to say, I can stretch my arms wider. And that's what we're doing. We're stretching our arms wider. And Jesus, in this room, we are followers of the way, of you. If you're in this room and you've never had an opportunity to say yes to Jesus, it's like, don't hesitate. Life is too short. Jesus says that he brings life and life in abundance. We want to follow you with everything we have inside of us. But God, there's this division that gets inside of us because of our convictions, but also it's muddied with our opinions. And it starts to feel like a wrestling match. And Jesus, we just want your peace. So allow us, God, to accept others, to invite in outsiders, to see those that nobody else sees. But God, help us with those who we disagree with. Help us with those who we're closest to. God, give us enough grace inside of us that it would multiply out into our communities. Jesus, we want to be the woman at your feet. The brokenness inside of us, we're not hiding it. We're just saying this is who we are. Our worship is just saying we're at your feet, Lord. We hear your words that we are forgiven. We hear it over our lives. Help us to put aside the things that divide us so we can have a heart for others. We give this to you in your name. Everybody said, amen. Would you worship with me tonight?
Let the King of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, he is my song. 'Cause you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, 'cause you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, let Let the King of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. So he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he is my song. 'Cause you are good, you're good. Oh, 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 'cause you're never gonna let me down. 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 Come on, sing that. 'Cause you're never gonna let me down. 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 Oh, you're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. Oh, you're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. 'Cause you are good, you're good. And oh, 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 you are good. 'Cause you're good, good Father.